Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate that warm welcome.
You're welcome.
So yeah, I'm like really happy to be here, and I'm very grateful to be asked to speak today. And it's one of my favorite topics. I am half Mexican American and primarily half Italian. That's how I identify mostly with my cultures. Um, and so I wanted to talk about growing up Mexican American. And it was interesting because I was kind of saturated into the Italian side of my family because my mom, she's Mexican American. She came from Northern California when she married my father to move out in the suburbs of Philadelphia. And so most of the culture that I know of with the food and like the culture is the Italian side. So, but I was like, but I am Mexican, and I'm like, I want to learn more about it. And we didn't grow up speaking Spanish at all because my mom, she was born in El Paso, Texas, and her parents, they were. I think my grandmother was born in New Mexico, and my grandfather was born in Chihuahua, Mexico. And I think they wanted when my mother was 5 years old, they moved to Northern California. And when they moved, my mom said that my grandfather wouldn't let any of them speak Spanish in the household because they wanted them to assimilate to the American culture. And in my eyes, I was like, wow, what a disservice. Because I was thinking, I would have loved to have grown up speaking Spanish. But it just didn't happen to be the case. And so my mother did, though, introduce us to, she knew some dishes that she would make, the Tex-Mex, the fried corn or flour tacos that she would make, and she would make the stuff called slop, which I later learned is really guisado, which is just hamburger meat and like garlic and onions and tomatoes. And sometimes she would put potatoes in it. And then we would eat it with tortillas. That's how we would scoop it up. And my Mexican grandma, she would come and visit, or we would go fly to California and visit her. And she taught my sister and I how to make flour tortillas. So that was some of the tradition I learned. And my mom also was really big into Latin music growing up in the Bay Area. So she listened to a lot of Latin jazz. And so that's what I grew up listening to. And my mom used to follow, I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with Peter Escovedo or Tito Puente, but my mom it was Sheila E.'s dad. So she was a big fan and followed Sheila E.'s dad and brother, Coco Escovedo, around the area. They would go and dance at all the clubs. So my mom was always dancing in the house, and since we were little, she said we were always dancing too. And actually, she said that I was dancing since I was in utero. She said she would put music on, and she would put a coffee cup on her belly when she was pregnant with me. And she said my little feet would be like pushing up against, like, to the beat of the music or whatever. So I guess that's where that interest started early in life. But we did not practice or celebrate Dia de los Muertos at all. I didn't really know about it, I think, until like hearing about it probably like later in life, probably like later as an adult. Or actually, I'll tell you the first time I heard about it. Okay, so some of you are going to laugh. Has anybody watched 90210 from the 1990s? So I remember the one character, Andrea, dated a Mexican American fella, and they lived in LA. And so my frame of reference was them going to the cemetery during that Halloween week and honoring their ancestors. So that was my exposure to it. But growing up Mexican American, I was just like, I really want to know more about my Mexican side. And how can I do that? I grew up in a monochromatically white community in North Wales, Pennsylvania. My elementary schools and my high schools didn't have a lot of diversity at all. I think there was maybe like one or two Latin, other people that were like half Latin in my high school. Or maybe only like two Black kids and maybe a couple of Asian kids too. So I made it a point, like my father, he went to college at Texas A&I, which is now I think Texas A&M. He went for animal husbandry for 6 months. So he became enamored with the Mexican culture, and then he was learning how to speak Spanish because he knows some Italian words, but he can't speak Italian fluently. And so when we were little, he used to yell commands at us, and I never knew what language he was speaking. I had no idea. Half the time he was yelling commands at us in Italian, half the time he's yelling commands at us in Spanish. So I was like, well, how can I learn Spanish? So I took 4 years of Spanish in high school, and so that was helpful. And then when I went to college, I think I pretty much took that all 4 years there too. Or was it just a few years? Because my nursing curriculum was pretty heavy and I was almost working full time. So I was already minoring in psychology. So I was trying to double minor in Spanish, but it was just too much of a load. So I really couldn't handle it. So after I graduated from university, then I continued to take Spanish. So I would go to community college just so I'd have the exposure. And then I immersed myself into like listening to like salsa and merengue and bachata music. And I was like, and I need to learn the dances too. And my mom always said, "Well, you don't really need to learn the dances," because she was just a natural. She's like, "You just close your eyes and move your body to the rhythm of the music." But I wanted to learn something a little bit more formally. So as an adult, I was taking like a little bit of ballroom. And then I had a group of friends, and we ended up taking salsa, merengue, and bachata lessons in North Philly, like on Tarsdale Avenue. So as a young adult, then we went to some of the clubs. We used to go, I don't know if any of you guys used to go, but back in the day, we would go to the 5 spot and the 8th floor, and we would practice our salsa moves there. So it was a lot of fun. I think 5 spot had swing too back in the day. This is like mid to late 90s. I was really trying to immerse myself in like every aspect of the culture. So, and I love watching cooking shows. So I would try to pick up how to make some of the recipes of different Latin foods, not necessarily always Mexican, but whatever spanned my interest. And then what else did I do? And then at some point, I also started learning percussion because I always loved the conga sound to a lot of the music. And and like my father kind of spurred that percussion interest because when I was a little girl, he would be driving us places and he would just get his hands and he would tap on the steering wheel or he would be tapping on the dashboard and percussing everything. So I'm like, you know what? I would like to learn. So I joined a Buddhist group, and they had ever victorious women's drummers in the city. It was the Soka Gakkai International. And that's when I started to learn a little bit of djembe. And I bought a quinto conga, which is like one of the smallest head conga that they have. And it's usually it's a high pitched sound when you drum. So that was really cool. And so that's kind of where I was. And so when I went to university, I also joined the Latino Student Union. So I could learn about my Latino-ness or whatever, my Latina-ness. And a lot of, they spoke Spanish and I didn't. So I'm like, oh. So like some people might consider me Mexican light because like I didn't grow up in a family. I wasn't immersed in speaking it fluently or anything like that. Um, but I just had this desire to really learn about that aspect of me that I felt like I really didn't know. Because all my mom's relatives were on the West Coast and there was like nobody here. And now through the years, like I live in Lansdale and within walking distance, I have 4 bodegas. So they're either Mexican or Guatemalan. And so I'm super excited. I can get like pastries or bakery stuff, or I can get food now. And then when I lived in Tennessee, I was married to a Colombian fella back in the day, and I had him be my tutor for learning Spanish. And then I always chose jobs that dealt with the monolingual Spanish population. So that's another way where I was listening in on medical rounds, listening to the translations between a lot of the counselors who were bilingual, the physicians and the patients. And the community that we worked with were primarily Puerto Rican and a little bit of Central and South American, but primarily Puerto Rican Spanish is what I developed an ear for. And my style of speaking, even though Castellano, Spanish was what we learned formally in school. Most of my patients working in a drug and alcohol rehab were from the streets. So my Spanish is like a little bit more streety, I think, like when I speak it. So I ended up doing a little bit of translation there after I got back from Tennessee. I moved to Tennessee when I was married. And at the time, my husband's Colombian, so he coached me on how to speak Spanish, and we would do exercises together. And I worked with the Mexican migrant population there at the health department. I was doing a lot of women's health, like birth control. I was doing physicals on young kids, immunizations, things of that nature. So I got a lot of exposure to the Mexican migrant population there. How am I doing on time? Am I going over time, Mike?
No, you could have about 7 minutes to go, 8 minutes.
Okay, so let me get to let me get to a little bit about Dia de los Muertos, and basically, so I've spoken to a lot of different people. So formally, they say Dia de los Muertos really occurs on November 1st and November 2nd, and the Aztecs built their civilization pretty much during the 14th century, which was centered around Tenochtitlan, which is now modern day Mexico City. And a lot of Aztecan gods and goddesses, they ruled the natural and the spiritual worlds. And November 1st is where they're honoring the ancestors, those who have passed on. They say that were the infants and the children. Now that correlates to the Catholic, is that All Saints Day?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that right, Cindy? I don't know if you're muted.
All Souls Day?
All Souls.
Oh,
Is it
so
All
All Souls
Souls?
Day, I'm sorry. All Souls Day is the 1st, right? And then November 2nd is All Saints Day, right? Okay, so November 2nd is when they honor the passing of the adults. So it's a very sacred time. I had to research this because my grandmother was Mexican but grew up in an orphanage. So they lost a lot of the traditions as well. So that's why I don't really know a lot about it. But so basically this holiday, Dia de los Muertos, is 3,000 years old. It was practiced by the Aztecan, the Toltec, the Mayan, and it also has some Catholic roots because the Catholics were trying to get the folks that were practicing more of the pagan type of religions to come on board too. So they try to sync it up with all the Catholic holiday traditions. So it's a life and a death celebration. So it's got that little yin yang thing going on. And that's when the ancestors come back to walk with us. So a lot of ceremonies are being performed. what they do is they decorate their graveyards with marigolds, and they honor like their ancestors that have passed. They create ofrendas, which are altars, and they put beautiful, their photos, marigolds, candles, their favorite food or drink, sometimes the candies and stuff. And all generations, grandmothers, grandkids, they're cleaning the gravestones, they're picking petals off of flowers, they place them on the graves of the loved ones. They said this is like a very emotional time, right? It's you're slowing down to remember, you know, maybe those favorite things you did with that family member that passed on. But they don't get entrenched in the grief. This is a time of celebration. So they're going to party it up, right? So what they're going to do, they're going to have music, they're going to have dance. The ofrenda is the altar. As I said before, the children, they place the sugar skulls and the candies on there. And a lot of times the marigolds would line the paths to the homes and things. And so, you know, death is not the end. It represents the ongoing cycle of life. And another goddess that is represented by Dia de los Muertos is known as Mixteca Cicuatl. Mixteca Cicuatl is the goddess of death, that she died in childbirth. And she's basically the hostess of this holiday. And the holiday is represented by butterflies, specifically monarchs, and they call them mariposas, okay? And they return back every year the same time. They fly over 2,000 miles away from Canada and North America to the Michoacan region of Mexico. They go to certain trees, they leave in March to fly back to the north, and they deposit their eggs so that their ancestors fly again. So that is some aspects of Dia de los Muertos. It has become reinvigorated with the Disney movie Coco. And it just happens to be my name, but I'm just saying the Disney movie Coco really brought a resurgence and I think an awareness to the American culture. So now you might be seeing people having, instead of Halloween parties, they might be having Dia de los Muertos parties now, which is a lot of fun, and a lot of people dress up. I just wanted to show you a few pictures. I had some technical difficulties, so I'm just going to show you on my phone. My mother's cousin retired to San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. And this is my cousin Rose, she's Filipino and Mexican, and her daughter. They're dressed up in, I don't know if you guys can see this over here. They're dressed up in the traditional sugar skull painted on their faces with the beautiful marigolds and the colorful garb as well. And in addition to that, this is our family altar that she created, the ofrenda. And if you can see up top, I don't know if it's getting too blurred out, that's Francisco Contreras and Rosalia Castro with my Auntie Maria as the baby. Those are my great-grandparents from Mexico. And then the aunt in the middle is my Auntie Maria and my Uncle Johnny. But you can see how beautifully they decorate. They have the skulls, the candles, the flowers, all that stuff. And I would love to go and visit. That'll be one of my goals, is to visit there. And do we have time for the meditation now, Mike? Or am I good on time?
Yeah, you're actually fine on time. You have a minute or two if you want to talk more. If not, we can go into comments and questions.
Oh, okay. Yes, I'm done, and I can go into comments and questions if you like.
Okay, sounds good.